Both heels beat against dry wood, a slow tap-tap that stirred the dust and made the boards creak like they carried more weight than one man's weighting. Jonas McGraw sat forward in his chair, hat brim tilted low against the punishing sun, eyes fixed on the dirt road that shimmered like a copper snake in the heat. The wind carried no mercy, only grit, only the rasp of sand against his throat. He spat into the yard, watching the spit dry before it touched earth. The land stretched wide and empty, half a ranch still fighting to be built. One corral stood upright, fence posts leaning like drunks at closing time. Beyond, the horizon trembled, promising wagons, promising change, promising the stagecoach that carried his bride-to-be. The sound came faint at first, iron wheels rattling, horses' hooves drumming in rhythm. Jonas rose slow, one hand brushing dust from his coat, the other tightening on the post. His heart struck harder than a hammer on an anvil, each beat echoing louder as the coach crested the rise. The team came down fast, tossing up clouds, sun burning their flanks, the driver's whip cutting air like thunder. Jonas stepped forward, boots sinking in dry ruts. He waited, every muscle in him taut, every thought circling the same picture. A woman stepping down, bonnet shading her face, a voice softer than wind at dusk. His mail-order bride. His chance to breathe again after death had already taken one wife from him. The coach rocked to a halt, brakes screaming, horses snorting and stamping against the bit. Dust swallowed everything, blinding, choking, until it cleared just enough to show the door swinging wide. Jonas held his breath. A boot came down first. Not a slipper, not a polished heel, but a scuffed leather boot with a knife sheath strapped tight. The second boot followed, heavy, purposeful. Out stepped a woman, not delicate, not dressed for greeting. She wore black trousers tucked into her boots, a coat the color of storm clouds, and on her hip hung a revolver worn silver with use. Her eyes caught the sun like shards of glass, sharp and unyielding. She looked at Jonas the way a hawk studies prey, measured, silent, already sure of her advantage. Jonas's stomach tightened. His bride was supposed to be a soft-spoken girl from Missouri, advertised in fine handwriting, promised by letter. This woman was no letter's promise. "You Jonas McGraw?" Her voice cut through the air, low and edged. "I am." His hand brushed the brim of his hat, more out of habit than courtesy. "Then it's me you're waiting on." She hitched her belt, metal glinting where the sun caught her revolver. "But I ain't what you ordered." The driver shifted in his seat, spat once, then cracked his reins, anxious to move on. The stagecoach rumbled away in a storm of dust, leaving only Jonas and the woman in its wake. The silence that followed felt heavier than a church bell tolling. Jonas squared his shoulders, voice steady but lined with disbelief. "Where's the lady meant for me?" "Elsewhere." She didn't blink, didn't falter. "Her place is mine now." Jonas felt the air tighten, the space between them drawn taut as a rope. Every instinct screamed danger, yet beneath it stirred something harder to name. The woman was Outlaw by the cut of her coat, by the set of her jaw. Still, she stood on his land, claiming it as sure as if she'd been written into fate's ledger. Around them, the land baked silent. The only sound came from a loose shutter on the half-built ranch, banging soft in the wind. Jonas let his hand fall near his holster, though he didn't draw. He'd seen enough death to know quick tempers dug graves faster than bullets. Her gaze flicked down, catching the motion, then back up to his eyes. A corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile, more like a dare. "You're armed," Jonas said flatly. "I'm alive," she returned, voice carrying the grit of long miles. "A woman don't get far out here without a gun. Least not one like me." "And what kind are you?" "The kind that ain't afraid to take what's left when the world's done talking." Jonas studied her, breath slow, heartbeat steadying though unease still ran its current. She was no bride. She was trouble wrapped in leather and steel. Yet she stood there, bold as sunrise, claiming a place not hers. Behind them, the desert stretched wide, the wind whispering old warnings through the sage. Jonas had lived long enough to know the land remembered every choice a man or woman made. Some were written in dust, some in blood. He shifted, stepping back toward the porch, voice calm though the air still vibrated with tension. "If it's my place you're claiming, then speak plain. You ride in alone, or ride in with shadows following behind?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing, the weight of secrets pressing close. Then, without breaking her stare, she laid her hand on the grip of her revolver, not drawing, just resting easy. "Shadows," she said, "and they'll be here soon enough." The words struck like a nail driven deep. Jonas knew then this was no mistake, no chance encounter. The desert had brought her for a reason, though he could not yet name it. Wind lifted the dust again, wrapping around them both. Jonas held her gaze, steady as stone, and in that silence the story rooted itself, fierce and unyielding, like mesquite clawing through rock. They stood in the dying light, cowboy and outlaw woman, the promise of a bride gone like smoke. The stagecoach wheels had already faded beyond the horizon, and with them, the life Jonas thought he was waiting for. What remained was this: a stranger armed, a claim made, and a road that would not turn back. And the desert watched, silent witness, as fate began its cruel bargain. The fire cracked hard, sparks flying up into the cold night, snapping like gunshots in the dark. Clara Vale crouched low, feeding another stick into the flames, her face sharp in the glow, shadows cutting hard lines across her jaw. Jonas McGraw sat across from her, rifle laid flat across his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. The coyotes had been howling for an hour, voices weaving through the desert like mourners calling at a grave. The sound set Jonas's teeth tight. The last time he'd heard such a chorus, he'd been burying a woman with his own two hands. "You keep looking at me like I'm your enemy," Clara said, voice low, steady as the fire. "Maybe you are." Jonas's hand shifted on the rifle, thumb brushing steel. Her laugh came dry, no warmth in it. "If I meant you harm, McGraw, you'd be bled out on that porch where I found you." Jonas didn't answer. The night was too heavy with silence to waste words. He watched her eyes instead. They told more than her mouth ever would. Eyes that carried dust storms and gun smoke. Eyes that had seen too much to ever be soft again. She leaned back, one boot stretched toward the fire, the other planted firm, as if she expected a fight to break out at any breath. "I know you expected something else," she said, flicking her gaze up at the stars. "A girl with ribbons and a soft tongue. But fate don't give a damn what men expect." The fire popped, and Jonas flinched, though he tried to hide it. His scars, deep in his chest where a rifle ball had torn through during the border skirmishes, ached when the cold set in. That pain was his reminder, always there, that sorrow never left for long. "What are you doing here?" His voice was gravel dragged across stone. Clara's eyes dropped back to him. For the first time that night, they softened. Not much, just enough to show the faintest crack. "Warning you." Jonas leaned forward, rifle sliding closer to his grip. "Warning me of what?" Her hand went to her coat pocket. He tensed, breath catching, but she only pulled free a folded scrap of cloth, tossing it across the fire. Jonas caught it, unrolling it slow. The symbol scrawled there in rough black paint struck him like a blow, a jagged V carved through a circle. The mark of the Red Valley Gang. Jonas's eyes narrowed. "I've seen that on bodies handgen from cottonwoods. Men left gutted, farms burned." Clara's mouth hardened. "You'll see it again here. Creed's coming." The name struck colder than the desert night. Silas Creed. A killer spoken of in saloon whispers. A man who carved fear deeper than any outlaw west of the Pecos. Jonas had heard of him, but hearing was different than knowing he was riding down on you. "Why warn me?" Jonas asked, voice sharp, distrust slicing every word. "Because you're sitting in his path," Clara said. Her hand curled into a fist with a firelight couldn't soften it. "And because Creed ain't just coming for gold or cattle. He's coming for blood." Jonas studied her, the lines of her face flickering with firelight. "You rode with them." She didn't flinch. "I did." The air thickened, coyotes falling silent like the desert itself leaned closer to hear. Jonas's finger brushed the trigger, though the rifle still rested low. "You admit it?" "I admit what I was." Her eyes locked on him, unyielding, daring him to look away. "But I ain't that anymore. I left them behind. I left them behind." Jonas's jaw tightened, teeth grinding as memory slammed through him. The war, the loss, the way trust had been bled out of him one betrayal at a time. "You expect me to believe that?" Clara leaned forward, her voice a blade pressed cold against his chest. "I don't care what you believe, McGraw, but Creed is coming, and if you don't get ready, you'll be 6 feet under before the month is out." The fire roared louder, as if answering her. Jonas stared across the flames, torn between the weight of her words and the weight of her sins. She was Outlaw, yes, but she spoke with the certainty of a prophet, every word laced with the sting of truth. His hand eased off the trigger, though the rifle never left his lap. "If Creed's coming, why not run? You could be half a territory away by now." Clara's gaze dropped for just a breath, her voice quieter, ragged at the edges. "Because running don't bring the dead back." Jonas felt the words punch into him, hollowing out the air in his chest. She didn't explain, but she didn't have to. He knew the sound of grief when it bled through a voice. The fire burned low, embers crackling, shadows stretching long across the desert floor. Jonas leaned back, hat brim hiding his eyes, though they never left her. Clara's hand rested on her revolver as she watched the dark beyond the firelight. Her body stayed taut, as if the night itself could rise up and strike. She was scarred, dangerous, soaked in sin she didn't deny. But she was also something else, something Jonas couldn't yet name. The wind picked up, carrying dust through the flames, making the shadows dance like spirits. Jonas felt the pull of old battles in his bones, a warning in his scars. The storm was coming, and across from him sat the woman who had already lived through it once, and bore its mark. The saloon doors slammed wide, banging against the frame like thunderclaps. Clara Vale strode through the haze of smoke and spilled whiskey, her revolver resting low at her hip, her eyes hard enough to still every card game and hush every fiddle. Men looked up from their drinks, words dying in their throats. Jonas followed a step behind, rifle slung over his shoulder, boots striking the boards with a steady drum. "Creed's riding this way," Clara barked, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. 3 days, maybe less. You keep drinking, you'll die with your mugs in your hands. The sheriff, slouched in the corner with a bottle for company, shifted only enough to mutter, "Ain't our fight, miss." His hat slid low, eyes hidden. Clara kicked a chair out from under a card player, the man sprawling with a curse. The crash rattled every glass in the room. "It'll be your fight when Creed burns your homes and guts your kin." No one moved. Silence pressed heavy. Then Jonas stepped forward, his voice slow, deep as gravel. "She's telling the truth. Creed don't leave survivors. I seen the mark myself." A murmur stirred, weak and frightened, like wind rustling dry grass. Men shifted in their chairs, but none reached for the rifles stacked by the wall. The weight of fear hung thick. Clara slammed her palm flat against the bar, rattling bottles. "You sit here hiding in the dark, hoping the storm will pass you by. But Creed don't pass. He consumes. If you won't fight for yourselves, then fight for the ones sleeping under your roofs." The bartender's hand shook as he poured a glass, whiskey splashing over the rim. Jonas's jaw tightened. He could see it in their faces, the dread, the hopelessness. They'd already surrendered in their hearts. Clara's hand went to her gun, drawing it clean in one swift motion. She spun and fired. The shot cracked through the saloon, shattering a lantern on the far wall. Flames licked up, sputtering against the boards before dying out, smoke curling into the rafters. Every man in the room flinched, hands jerking toward holsters, but none dared draw. Her voice rang fierce. "That's the speed Creed rides with. That's the fire he brings. You think hiding will save you? You'll burn quicker than that lantern." Jonas stepped beside her, rifle leveled at the floor, his voice steady. "You've got 2 choices. Take up arms or watch your town die." The silence cracked. A farmer near the back pushed himself to his feet, hat twisting in his hands. "If what she says is true, I'll stand." Another rose, then another, the fear shifting into something harder, sharper. One by one, chairs scraped back, boots thudding as men gathered. Not all, but enough to begin. Clara nodded once, holstering her gun. "Dawn, Main Street. Bring every rifle, every blade, every ounce of grit you've got left. Morning came with dust hanging thick, the town square filled with men who looked more like farmers than fighters. Their hands shook on rifles too clean from disuse, barrels catching the sun like untested mirrors. Clara moved among them, boots grinding grit, voice sharp as steel. Stand your ground. Shoulders square. Don't let the weight of that rifle pull you crooked. She shoved a man's stance wide with the toe of her boot, slapped another's elbow until his aim steadied. Creed won't wait for you to get comfortable. Jonas watched, leaning against the hitch rail, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. She was no bride, no damsel. She was commander, teacher Storm. The town bent to her will, fear breaking into discipline. She drew her own revolver, twirling it once before cocking it smooth. Ain't about being the fastest. It's about not hesitating. You hesitate, you're dead. She fired at a bottle lined on the fence, glass exploding into dust and sun. Again, she snapped, motioning to the man beside her. His shot rang wide, kicking dirt. Again, her voice cracked like a whip until the man's hand steadied. His next shot splintering wood. Sweat dripped, rifles barked, and the main street thundered with practice until the sun dipped west. Dust coated every throat, but resolve replaced the hollow in their eyes. When the drills broke, Clara stood alone at the end of the street, revolver resting easy at her side. Jonas stepped up beside her, watching the men scatter toward their homes. You turned him, he said, voice low. She didn't look at him. Fear turns quicker than courage. We'll see which holds when Creed rides in. Jonas studied her profile, the hard line of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. Why do this? These folks ain't yours. For a long moment she stayed silent, the wind tugging her coat, dust curling at their boots. Then she spoke, voice rougher, stripped bare. Creed took my sister. She was 16. He left her in the dirt outside Red Valley, with his mark carved into her skin. I swore I'd see him fall, even if I burned with him. Jonas felt the weight of her words dig deep, stirring old wounds in his chest. He reached for his hat, pulling it low to hide the grief that flickered in his eyes. The church bell tolled once, echoing through the canyon walls like a warning. Both of them turned, staring down the road that stretched toward the horizon. Dust hung far off, faint but growing, like a storm building in silence. Clara's hand slid to her gun, eyes narrowing. 3 days, I said. Looks like we'll be lucky to get 2. Jonas lifted his rifle, chamber clicking sharp. The air felt heavy, charged, like the world itself held its breath. The town was no longer asleep. Under Clara's fire, it had woken. But the shadow coming down that road was darker than any dream, and the desert waited, hungry, to see who would still be standing when the dust cleared. The ground shook with the thunder of hooves, dust boiling up in a wall that swallowed the horizon. The Red Valley gang came hard, rifles glinting, faces twisted in the morning glare. At their head rode Silas Creed, long black coat snapping behind him, his smile cutting through the haze like a knife. The townsfolk stood shoulder to shoulder along the main street, rifles gripped tight, eyes wide but steady. Sweat ran down brows, breath short and sharp, boots planted deep in dust. Jonas McGraw knelt behind a water trough, rifle braced across the rim, his heartbeat a steady drum against the silence that pressed heavy before the storm broke. Clara Vale stood in the center of the street, hands loose at her sides, revolvers gleaming silver in the dawn. Her coat lifted in the wind, dust curling around her boots like smoke. She didn't flinch as Creed's riders fanned wide, circling, hollering like devils loose from hell. Creed pulled his horse up hard, hooves striking sparks from the stone. His voice boomed, low and cruel. Thought you could hide, Clara? Thought you could steal what's mine? Clara's gaze never wavered. I stole nothing. I left you. There's a difference. Laughter rolled from a gang, harsh and jagged. Creed leaned forward in the saddle, eyes burning. You left me, and now you'll pay for it. You and every soul fool enough to stand with you. His hand dropped to his holster. Clara's guns cleared leather before the thought finished crossing his mind. 2 shots cracked, deafening, the echoes smashing through the canyons. Creed's hat flew from his head, dust exploding beside his boots. He snarled, jerking his horse back. "Now!" Jonas roared. The town erupted. Rifles fired in ragged unison, smoke swallowing the street, the air torn with screams and the crash of lead on wood. Horses reared. Gang riders toppled into the dust. The ground littered with the thunder of battle. Clara moved through it like a shadow, revolvers flashing, her stride calm, deadly. She cut men down with precision, each shot measured, each movement sure. Jonas's rifle barked steady from cover, his eyes locked on the shapes bursting through smoke. He dropped one, then another, each fall kicking dust into the storm. The gang pressed hard, firing from the saddle, bullets splitting boards, glass raining from windows. Townsfolk faltered, fear clawing back, but Clara's voice rang sharp above the din. "Hold. Hold your ground." She fired into the dirt at their feet, snapping them awake. "Don't give him an inch." Creed's howl rose above the chaos, a wolf's cry, his revolvers blazing as he cut through the line. He rode straight for Clara, horse pounding, dust exploding under its hooves. She turned, eyes locked, every muscle still. "Silas!" she shouted, voice tearing through smoke. Their guns lifted in the same breath. The world froze, time stretched thin as a razor. Two shots cracked as one. Creed staggered in the saddle, his horse screaming, blood dark on his coat. Clara spun with the force of her wound, crimson blooming across her side, but her hand steadied, her revolver still trained on him. Creed's eyes went wide, disbelief breaking through fury as he toppled backward, crashing into the dust. The gang's fire faltered, men shouting, horses scattering. Jonas surged to his feet, rifle raised, voice like thunder. "They're broken. Drive 'em out." The townsfolk, ignited, pressed forward, rifles roaring, boots pounding. The gang splintered, fleeing in the cloud of their own fear, their cries fading down the canyon road. The dust settled, the silence broken only by the ragged breath of men who had stood against death and lived. Jonas dropped his rifle and ran to Clara. She was on her knees in the street, hand pressed hard against her side, blood seeping hot between her fingers. Her face was pale, lips trembling, but her eyes burned still, fierce as ever. He dropped beside her, hands shaking as he tried to press the wound. "Stay with me," he said, voice raw. "You ain't leaving me here like this." Clara's breath came shallow, words pulled from deep inside. "I didn't come to stay, Jonas. I came to finish." His throat closed tight, grief clawing up fast, but she reached, hand brushing his, grip weak but certain. "My sister, he's gone now. She can rest. And so can I." Tears stung his eyes, blurring the dust and the blood. "You didn't have to do this." She tried to smile, faint, fragile, but her voice carried weight enough to shake the silence. "Maybe not, but legends don't get to choose." Her hand fell, her eyes softening as the last breath left her chest. The desert wind rose, lifting her hair, carrying the smoke away until only stillness remained. Jonas sat in the dust, cradling her, the town gathered behind him, silent as the grave. No cheers, no victory cries, just the hush of men who had seen a legend born in blood and fire. An old man stepped forward, hat in hand, voice breaking the quiet. "She saved us." Jonas lowered his head, whispering words that only the desert heard. And so the tale rooted deep, carried from tongue to tongue, year to year. They said when the wind howled through Red Valley, you could hear the echo of her gunshots, sharp as thunder, fierce as justice. They said a woman came once in a bride's place, not with a veil, but with iron and fire, and left not as a bride, but as a legend. And the desert remembered her name, Clara Vale.